So I want to bring in now David Marcus. He is a former president of PayPal, a former senior executive at Meta as well. Currently the CEO and co-founder of the payments platform Lightspark. And David says he is still bullish on Bitcoin. So David, let me start there on the price action that we've been seeing. Crypto has had this terrible, horrible, no good, very bad 2026 ever since the events of October 10th. What do you chalk up this weakness to, this volatility to?
Well, I think there's a lot of structural pressure on Bitcoin that's been happening after 1010, and I think your guests on the show have spoken at length about this. And I think it's just a change of who's holding Bitcoin, and you're moving from people who had long-term belief and were holding Bitcoin directly to just access to Bitcoin being wired up to our financial system and markets in ways that didn't happen before. So the combination of what happened on 1010 plus the mix shift change of who's holding changes the dynamic of price action. But I think, look, at the end of the day, as far as Bitcoin is concerned, this is not, a short-term market play. You have to have long-term belief and vision of, what it does in terms of an edge to everything else that's happening on the market. And I think that for those people who have that long-term belief, they'll be fine.
So I want to talk to you about your view of Bitcoin's role, because one thing that we've been discussing since last week is sort of this, what critics call an identity crisis for the cryptocurrency. And we didn't see it really as a safe haven, with the debasement trade. We saw gold actually move higher last year and this year, David, but Bitcoin didn't perform like, quote unquote digital gold. What is the use case for it?
I mean, look, I think the problem is if you're looking at it in time frames that are fairly short, then you'll have moments where it does that. But I think that over the very long run, if you're holding Bitcoin for, say, the next 10 years, you'll probably do better than holding almost any other asset for the purpose of actually being a hedge to everything else that's happening, and debasement and money printing and all of these things. And I still stand by that. I think that in short periods of time, you'll see volatility and all kinds of different things playing into the price. In the long run, I think we'll all be better off holding Bitcoin versus any other asset, frankly.
What I found interesting about what you said regarding the holders of Bitcoin now is kind of how it's now institutional investors. It's kind of like the financialization of Bitcoin. And that brings me to something else that you've written about lately, which is PayPal, the company that you were formerly affiliated with. You shared your thoughts on the company some 12 years after you left. Obviously, there was some frustration there. You talked about how over time the company had every advantage and could have become the most consequential and relevant payments company of our time, but it lost its mojo, its product edge, its ability to compete in a market that's being rewired and reinvented in front of our eyes. I guess the question here is, can it be fixed? And is crypto rails the way to do that?
Well, it's definitely one of the ways to do that. I think the company still has formidable assets, but I think there's not a lot of time to actually fix whatever is left there. And yes, you sensed frustration because there was a tremendous amount, and there is a tremendous amount of frustration because this was kind of a crown jewel of this whole industry, and clearly mismanaged for way too long. So I think there's still a way to save the company, so to speak. I think Venmo is a phenomenal asset. I think branded checkout is a phenomenal asset. I think they have better data than almost anyone else to underwrite credit better and change the funding mix of transactions for e-commerce. But look, the displacement has happened at a very large scale. Think about the last time you used PayPal to pay for something on your mobile phone versus Apple Pay or Shop Pay for that matter. And you'd be hard pressed to remember that it used to be that everyone used to pay with PayPal. So I think, share of checkout, getting back in those checkout flows, using new rails like blockchains, stable coins, and others to actually expand globally definitely are all part of the solution here.
Should it be broken up in any way? Should they start to shed assets, in your view, David?
I mean, I don't know. I feel like there are definitely like bad assets in there. You know, I named a few in the post. I think, you know, acquisitions that didn't really make sense for the company. But is that going to move the needle if you're trying to focus on what matters or not? You know, maybe at a marginal level, but it's just not going to affect the change you want. You really have to, you know, really blow up the way that they operate in a pretty profound way.
Does all of this present an opportunity for Lightspark, your company that you have now?
Well, I think it presents an opportunity for a lot of the companies and clients that are using Lightspark for money movement globally to enable businesses to accept payments from anywhere in the world in real time, 24/7. And you know, we have lots of clients that are actually eating into market share of PayPal right now, leveraging our network and our capabilities of global money movement. So it's indirectly an opportunity for us that newer players leveraging newer rails and newer capabilities are actually eating into PayPal's market share.
I want to ask you about your move to support President Trump. In July 2024, you posted something on X saying that you're crossing the Rubicon and backing the Republican Party and President Trump, saying that you believe we need a president who is unequivocally pro-America, pro-Constitution, and you cited Bitcoin and crypto in there. More than a year into his term, do you believe President Trump has delivered on the things you were looking for from him as a pro-crypto president?
Well, I mean, it definitely beat the alternative by a long margin. I think that, you know, if you look at where we were under the Biden administration, where you literally had a government that was trying to kill an entire industry, and actively kill an entire industry, to a government and administration that is setting up the rules of the road for crypto, for stable coins, for digital assets to actually be innovated on in America instead of abroad. I think the outcome is really clear, and we're much better off. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone in the industry that feels differently.
Should the U.S. government buy Bitcoin? There's been some discussion lately about back at the Reserve. The Reserve right now is just seized assets. Should the U.S. actually spend taxpayer money to buy assets?
No, I don't think it should spend taxpayer money to buy assets. I think rotating off other assets into Bitcoin in a very cautious way and slowly, I think potentially makes sense. But I
meaning
don't
like
think
gold, like selling gold to buy Bitcoin.
I mean, Bitcoin is so much better than gold. Come on, it's a no-brainer. But I do think that we need to be cautious about this, because if a government actually buys into Bitcoin at a very large scale, and then you have another administration that comes in and changes their minds, long term it could have very negative impact on Bitcoin. So that's why I'm saying the government should potentially rotate a very tiny slice of its gold reserves into Bitcoin reserves. But do it very slowly and deliberately, and not rush into it. I think that would be my preference. Or don't do it at all. But I think being too bold here might fire back long term.
David, don't be a stranger. Come join us again soon. Appreciate it. Lightspark's David.